Hello, my name is Christy Garner, and I will be sharing with you my action research project on restorative practices in the classroom. This is a short video based on restorative practices. It's done by a Great Britain education company, so it's called Restorative Approaches. However, it still has the same methodology, thought process, and interventions as restorative practices. For time's sake, I am not going to play it today, but it is a great video. I would suggest looking it up. What is restorative justice? Restorative practice actually came out of restorative justice. So I want to give you a brief definition of that. Restorative justice is a system of justice. Instead of a set list of consequences for different infractions, restorative justice focuses on the harm created to that person. On the right, you will see a great quote from Howard Zerr, which has the Little Book of Restorative Justices. I would highly recommend that book. The path of restorative justice to restorative practices. I'm not going to read this all to you, but I'm going to go just little brief summaries. So restorative justice came in the 1970s as a way to navigate the traditional discipline system for inmates and the court process, such as alternative dispute resolution. In the 2000s, it was noticed by educators that it could be a way of addressing youth crime. And then the first practice of this was in a school setting, and it was restorative conferencing. This process addresses the needs of those who are responsible for causing the harm as well as those who are harmed. And they've found that it did prevent and become effective for not only reducing the use of exclusion, which is like suspensions, but reducing the behaviors that led to them. As it got more involved and more people got on board, they not only used it for very serious discipline infractions, but they started using it for minor ones as well. And today, they call it restorative practices in schools instead of restorative justice, because they want it to be a school-wide philosophy about how to make, maintain, and repair relationships. All right, so how does restorative practices work in school? This is a really good flow chart. I will not read it all to you, but it gives a scenario at the beginning. A student, Carlos, had a heated argument with his parents before leaving for school, so he's running late. And then let's see the differences between a zero tolerance education system and a restorative practice-based education system. You'll notice that throughout the zero tolerance one, nobody's trying to help Carlos. They're just, getting on him, getting back at him when he does something. Instead of trying to help him, they just give him consequences after consequences. And then the restorative practices-based system is, first of all, he's identified quickly that he is having a problem today. He sets up a meeting with the counselor. He wants to learn more. And then as the peer mediators and staff intervene, when things get heated in the cafeteria, they have the students sit down, talk about it, de-escalate, and then they eventually come for a way to repair the harm between themselves, the custodian, the lunchroom, and meets with the counselor and parents to help resolve the conflict at home. My district is implementing the restorative practices across the district this year. So my action research question is, will the new implementation of restorative practices help lessen discipline infractions as opposed to the traditional system we have used in the past? There were a lot of themes. I'm going to just quickly focus on 3 in my literature review. Relationships, I saw that theme and that word in every single paper or review or article I read. Basically, the relationship piece is the cornerstone of restorative practices. If you do not have that positive relationship with students, staff, parents, and even the community around you, restorative practices will not work, because you will not have that foundation of trust and sense of community that you need to get it done. It was when they did it in New York City's Positive Learning Collaborative, they saw a 46% reduction in suspensions and a 40% reduction in disciplinary incidents overall. And it was determined that the most effective teachers in working with challenging students had very positive relationships with them. The next one, trend that I saw, was a lot of proactive intervention in traditional discipline systems. Proactive intervention is virtually not there. It's kind of like if anything, they give you it's your one last chance, or this is your last warning kind of system. Proactive intervention means looking at those students, seeing that they're when they come in, they're having a bad day, looking at data and trends, identifying at-risk students so they can start things like working with a social worker, working with a counselor, working with small groups who are having the same issue. Little things like this can make a world of difference when it comes to helping de-escalate a student. And proactive interventions also focus on intrinsic instead of extrinsic rewards. So instead of trying to earn something or win something or get something, they are focusing on the student's self-esteem and confidence. And that way it's not punitive or demoralizing if the student does not achieve the end result. It's more about the process and proactive intervention. And finally, the last one is bias and equity. There is a huge equity gap, not only academically, but as it relates to discipline. Just a couple statistics. Black students are suspended and expelled at a rate 3 times greater than white students, while students with disabilities are likely to receive an out-of-school suspension as their non-disabled peers. Another report said that under traditional discipline approaches, 1 in 5 Black boys and more than 1 in 10 Black girls received out-of-school suspension. Overall, Black students were 3.5 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white peers. And even in districts where Black students and Hispanic students were almost half of the population, 56% of those students were still expelled with schools that had zero tolerance policies. So my rationale for conducting my action research was multifold. I wanted to do a comparison between the traditional discipline we had been using to the new one we were incorporating. So that meant I would need data not only from this year, but I would need it from last year. I chose to do it in 2 ways, to have an entire school snapshot and then breakdown of individual students' behavior for both years. I also wanted input from teachers who had taught at Barrington for both these school years, and that was to get the staff's perception on how the new system was working compared to the traditional practices we had used previously. The methods I used were twofold. Quantitative data, I compared the monthly discipline data from the 2017-18 to 2018-19. This included the breakdown in the variance, if any, between certain discipline patterns and consequences. And then I sorted through my students. As the music teacher, I teach everyone in school. And I separated students who were at Barrington both in the first quarter of 17-18 and 18-19. I took their behavior grades from my class for the first quarter of 17-18, and I compared them to first quarter grades for 18-19. I wanted to do this so that I could have a literal apples to apples comparison data across the grade levels and genders. And then I sent out a survey to teachers who had taught both years. And like I said, it was designed to get teachers' opinions, and not just for their classroom, but as a school-wide as a whole. I also wanted to know how many of the suggested practices that we've used or introduced to the staff they were using in their classroom and the frequency that they were using them. Procedures, I collected the behavior data from my principal for last year. I got the data for this year for the school from the head of my PBS committee, and then I started breaking it down into various parts. I used my grade book for last year and this year, and I took out any student who was not present during both years, first quarter, so like kindergarten, new students who moved in after first quarter last year. And then I broke down the remaining 253 students and into 2 different categories that are given on the report card. One is listens and follows directions, and one is participates appropriately. And then I looked for negative or positive growth between the years, and it was done by grade level, and I'm hoping to have it done by gender by the end of this paper as well. For qualitative data, I sent out my survey on October 30th, and new staff, retired staff, or staff who were not at Barrington were not included in order to keep the survey results valid. On the other side, you can see kind of the breakdown of what I had so far. You'll notice that there was a positive trend in my first 3 grade level switches, K to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. However, in 3 to 4, 4 to 5, there are major drops. So the results from my teacher survey, they're still in progress, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And my school-wide data comparison is almost done, but I didn't put it on there because I decided to go one step further with it. I originally was just doing minors and referrals and leaving it at that. But then I decided I wanted to go break down referrals into the action that was taken, because I think that's a big part of restorative practices. So I wanted to see how many of them actually the result was conferencing, how many were given detention, how many were given ISS, OSS between the 2 years. My findings, my student-to-student comparisons, as you saw, positive trend in the younger grades, huge drop-off in the 2 older grades. I was kind of surprised because my students have had me for almost their entire time at Barrington. Most of my students, probably 85%, have been with me since kindergarten or first grade. So I thought it might be more positive or neutral. While my school-wide work is not quite complete because of that other set of data I talked about, I am seeing a trend in lower number of minor incidents. The office referral numbers are questionable, and so I'm looking to see if there's an issue or if there's something that's going on, perhaps that one or two students are getting either a high number or a long period of time out of school consequences, which might be skewing it. My qualitative data has been very interesting. Teachers were honest, but I've only received 10 responses, so I'm trying one more time to see if I can get a few more participants before I draw any kind of conclusions. I'm a person who always questions my own work as well as other people's. So in going through this, I tried to think what could possibly be interfering with my data. And the first thing I thought about was with my personal first quarter data comparisons might not be necessarily because of me, but it could be because that a lot of things happen from that third to fourth to fifth switch. Third grade is the first time students are given letter grades instead of numerical numbers, which is a huge shift in stress for students and parents. And fourth and fifth grade actually start rotating classes, just like middle schoolers. In our school, that means instead of one teacher, one classroom, one safe place, they are dealing with up to 4 or 5 teachers with different personalities, different ways of teaching, different styles, different personalities. Or it just could be as simple as, they liked the old teacher this year, they don't like the new teacher, or it's new students that are coming in or old students that are leaving that are creating different dynamics. The school-wide data, the initial, like I said, have been positive. An example, but there have been a lot of changes in our discipline system as to the flow chart. So an example would be instead of giving 3 minor incident reports before a student receives a referral, it is now 5. And this would definitely account for a drop in referrals if that ends up being the case. So this is what I have so far, and I'm hoping to have it all completed in time for my final turn-in. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.